Hello, my name is Omar Harami. Thank you for joining us for the fourth Kumi Now online gathering. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping points to cover so that this session can run as smoothly as possible. This session is being broadcasted live on Facebook. If you do not wish to appear, please turn off your video feed. We would also love it if you could quickly share the Facebook post on Facebook so that others may join. We will be muting everyone during the session, except those speaking. If you wish to speak, please use the raise hand option under participants or indicate in the chat to Kumi team. Individuals will not be able to unmute themselves. If you wish to ask a question of the speakers, please type into the chat box. When it comes to questions at the end of the session, we will use questions shared in the chat. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat to message Kumi team privately, and we will try to help you with them. We hope that you will find this session interesting and informative. I'd like to start by having everyone you'll be seeing today introduce themselves. Maddie?
Hello, my name is Maddie Thompson. I helped with Kumi Now in the compiling of information, and I'm excited to be here.
Budour Hasan? Budour is having some problems, so we will move to Cedar Duabyis.
Did you hear me, Omar? Hello, Omar?
Could you please introduce yourself, Auntie?
I did. You didn't hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yes, my name is Cedar Duabyis. I'm one of the co-founders of Sabeel. I served on the board of Sabeel for many, many years, and now I'm on the General Assembly of Sabeel.
Thank you. Raffoul Rofa.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raffoul Rofa. I'm a lawyer and the director of the Society of St. Yves Catholic Human Rights Center based in Jerusalem. And I'll be talking about the legal issues that Palestinians face in Jerusalem.
Thank you, Raffoul. And now we will move to Reverend Naim Ateek, Assis. Assis, you're still on mute.
Okay. Shall I repeat?
Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Naim Ateek. I am one of the co-founders of Sabeel, and now I'm the chair of Sabeel's General Assembly.
Thank you, Assis. Budour?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah, can
Yes.
you hear me now? Great.
Yes.
So my name is Budour Hasan. I'm a legal researcher working at the Jerusalem Legal Center. I live in Jerusalem, from the village of Mashhad near Nazareth.
Now, here is Maddie for the welcome and introduction to the sessions.
Thank you. I'd like to again welcome everyone to this online gathering. We know that everyone is on Zoom nowadays, but we see this as an opportunity to fulfill the main goal of Kumi Now, bringing activists around the world together with the organizations on the ground in Palestine and Israel. We know there are people around the world that want to make a difference. We know there are dozens, even hundreds, of great organizations working for Palestinian rights, both abroad and here in Palestine. But for activists half a world away, it is daunting to know what to do and how to make a difference. Organizations focused on fulfilling their missions often find it difficult for numerous reasons to get their message out and find the help they need. This is where Kumi Now comes in, and this is where you come in. Kumi Now has been building steam, trying to make these connections. Everyone likes the idea, and everyone acknowledges they need it. With these Kumi Now online sessions, we hope to take this network building to the next level, bringing activists and organizations one step closer together, and starting a myriad of discussions, small and large, about how we work together to multiply our impact. Which brings us to today and this week, as we partner with Sabeel and learn about the effects of occupation on Jerusalem. But first, before we get to Sabeel, I'd like to invite Budour to give us an update on what is going on the ground.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. I will talk about a recent development that happened at the Israeli Supreme Court and what it means for Palestinians generally. It's not limited to Jerusalem, but I do believe that it's important when we talk about Palestine to one of the ways to challenge the fragmentation of Palestine by talking about Palestine as one in Israel, and obviously understanding that it's one struggle for liberation all over the territory of historic Palestine. So what happened on the 9th of June was that the Israeli Supreme Court decided to overrule or to cancel the regularization law. And the regularization law is a law that retroactively legitimized Israeli settlements built on private Palestinian land. Obviously, all types of settlements are illegal under international law, and obviously are illegal in the eyes of Palestinians. So we don't need the categorization of private or public to know that the land is Palestinian. But under Israeli categorization, building on private Palestinian land is even prohibited, not just under international law, but also under Israeli law. Which what the law did is basically retroactively allow these settlements by retroactively again expropriate the lands of Palestinians in Area C, and thus legitimizing thousands of settlement units. The thing is, what should Israel do with this law? This law was obviously enacted in 2016 to serve the settlers, and in 2017 to serve the settlers, and there was a hearing at the court held in 2018. Now, this law put Israel in a quite difficult position, because on the one hand, Israel always tries to portray its occupation as some sort of legal occupation, or to stamp it with some sort of legality. But on the other hand, we know that much of this occupation relies upon thuggery. So how it's going to legitimize its thuggery? Many of those who support Israel, including the Attorney General of Israel, including some of Israel's most loyal supporters, are okay with the racist endeavor that is settlements, that is the expansion of settlements, Jewish-only settlements. What they have issue with sometimes is the ways and the tactics in which it's done. So they are fine with continuing the settlements as soon as this thuggery doesn't take this blatant shape. So as soon as this is done recrementally, without much fuss, without much noise. Now, for them, this law was problematic not because it legitimized the stealing of Palestinian lands, because they have been stealing Palestinian land since 1948. So there is basically nothing new under the sun. Like, for example, after the occupation of 1948, the lands that belonged to Palestinians in 1948 who stayed on their lands were expropriated under all sorts of laws, including the absentee property law and including the acquisition of lands law. But after 1967, the same happened in the West Bank. There were many lands, both in Jerusalem and in the West Bank, declared as state territory, and then their citizens, the Palestinians, could not build on this. But then they wanted to expropriate as much land as possible, and they did that by encouraging settlers to build on private Palestinian land, not just on other types of land that they stole before the 1970s. So what the court basically told the state of Israel is, look, we want you to continue, basically, I mean, not obviously, not per se, but basically what the message of the court was, okay, so you want to continue building settlements, fine, but try not to do it with such a thuggish law. Try to do it indirectly without causing us to have a confrontation with the international system, without imposing the possibility of the International Criminal Court putting too much pressure on you. So there are other alternatives. You don't need this particular law in order to legitimize settlement. There are other ways in which you as a state can legitimize settlements. There are Ottoman laws that can achieve this purpose. There are also other types of laws that, especially there is a military order that also allows Israelis who supposedly bought a land in good faith from the army or from the state to legitimize the deal, even though they didn't own, and even though they didn't own the land. So this is very important to know. This is why the court canceled this law. The court didn't cancel this law or didn't repeal this law because it was not illegal. Obviously, the pretext was that this law was unconstitutional under Israeli law. The main reason, in my opinion, that the court repealed this law is that because if that law had been enacted or had been allowed to stand, it would have been a disaster, a PR disaster for Israel, and it would have increased the possibility of prosecuting Israel for war crimes under the ICC. By repealing the law, the Israeli court is trying to send a message to the ICC that, look, there are legal avenues in Israel that can challenge the authorities. Now, as annexation looms and as the day for formal annexation, because we always, when we talk about annexation, we should understand that annexation won't start on the 1st of July. We have been having de facto creeping annexation for decades, and it has escalated for years. Obviously, any move towards legal de jure annexation is very important because it puts a stamp. It puts some sort of a stamp of closure. So this is why Israel is desperate to go this move. But we should be careful to understand that for decades, it was not just the Israeli army and not just the Israeli right wing, all over the Israeli spectrum, including the Israeli courts, that always try to pretend that they are progressive, that they are liberal, that they are pro-rights, that they are pro-equality, etc., etc. All of them have been working hand in hand, in unison. Sometimes their tactics may differ. Obviously, tactics differ, but their strategy of eating as much land as possible and getting rid of as many Palestinians as possible has not changed. So even when the Israeli court does issue a positive result, we should not just look at the positive result. We should look beyond that. What alternatives do the Israeli settlers have to annex and to eat more Palestinian land without this causing an international fuss? I'm sorry if I was too long.
Thank you, Budour. And now we will move with to our beloved Cedar Duabyis, who is a co-founder of Sabeel.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you.
You can hear me.
Yes, please.
So Yeah, I'm going to tell you about Sabeel, briefly about Sabeel, the Palestinian Liberation Theology Movement. The word Sabeel is an Arabic word, and it means the way, and it also means a spring of life-giving water along the way. Although Sabeel was officially established in 1993, it has the seeds of Sabeel and the roots of Sabeel go back to the time that you heard about from Budour, to the time of the Palestinian Nakba in 1948. And I went through that experience, and I know about it, about all the difficulty that the Palestinian people went through and their dispossession. So when we fled from our homes, we took nothing with us. And as you know, some 750,000 Palestinians were driven out of their homes or fled in fear outside of the country. But there were also many who became internal refugees. Among those, 35% of the Christians who lived in Palestine at that time, who were Palestinian Christians at that time, also became refugees. And the number is about 50,000 Palestinian Christians. Now, in my case, I became an internal refugee, and we ended up in Nazareth, fleeing from Haifa. And we had nothing. We had lost everything that we had. But we thought that we still had our faith, until we found that even that had failed us, because our faith clashed with the reality of our lives. Western Christians saw a fulfillment of prophecy in the establishment of the State of Israel and the Nakba, or the catastrophe that befell the Palestinian people. The Jewish people saw the fulfillment of their dream by establishing a state and fleeing from the oppression and persecution in Europe. The Zionist movement saw the fulfillment of their willpower by achieving empowerment and establishing a state. The Palestinian saw a catastrophe, the Nakba. And we had lost everything. And when we most needed our faith, when we most needed to pray, when we most needed to read our holy book, to find hope and direction for our lives, it wasn't there for us. Because the establishment of the State of Israel claimed, and the Jewish people claimed, that they had divine approval to claiming the land exclusively for the Jewish people. So it looked like the Bible, our holy book, turned against us. And let me just quote Father Naim, Ateek, who is with us today, about this event. He says in his book, Justice and Only Justice, the establishment of the State of Israel was a seismic tremor of enormous magnitude that has shaken the very foundation of our beliefs. And it said, as a result, the Old Testament, or the Hebrew scriptures, have generally fallen into disuse among both clergy and laity, and the church has been unable to come to terms with its ambiguities, questions, and paradoxes. So we found that we did not even have our faith to sustain us and support us in the difficult times that we were going through. So how do we read the Bible? And I must mention here that it was Father Naim Ateek who was the first person to face this problem and to determine to do something in order to redeem the Holy Book for Palestinian Christians, and not only to help them hold on to their faith, but also to help them draw on their faith to work for peace, justice, and reconciliation. So this is the theological thinking that was behind the establishment of the Sabeel Palestinian Liberation Theology Movement. Now, it's Palestinian. The theology is not Palestinian. The theology is biblically based and theologically sound. Palestinian is the context. Palestinian is the experience. And Palestinian is the need for a solution to our faith crisis. Now, when we come to the word liberation, many people ask liberation from what? So not only was it liberation, or we sought liberation for our country, liberation for the oppression that our people were subjected to, but also liberation from a reading of the Bible that gave divine approval to what happened in 1948. So that was one of the main reasons for the establishment of this liberation movement. And here I must mention, there are other liberation theologies around the world, like Latin American and South African and others, but they use the imagery in the Bible and they use the stories of the Bible to support their liberation theology. We Palestinians cannot do that, because we firmly believe, that liberation has to be for all. It cannot be liberation for one side with the enslavement of the other side. Everybody has to be liberated for it to be true liberation. Now, yes. For example, some of the imagery or some of the stories, some of the language that other liberation theologies used was the Exodus story, whether the Exodus from Egypt in ancient times or the Exodus from Europe in the 20th century in modern times. It ended in the conquest of our land, Palestine, and the Palestinians suffered oppression. Now, the Jewish claim to the promised land is the dispossession of the Palestinians from their land. Jewish peoplehood excludes the existence of Palestinians as a people, and Jewish redemption is Palestinian oppression. Now, we, the Palestinian Christians and all the Palestinian people, hopefully will never gain our liberation at the expense of another people. What we are seeking is liberation for everybody, especially in our land, the Holy Land, and we will never lose hope to achieve that. Now, theology, let me come to the word theology, Palestinian liberation theology. If we think of theology as a bridge that leads people to a better understanding and knowledge of God, in 1948, when we most needed our faith, when we most needed to pray, when we most needed direction for our lives, we sought it in the Bible, but it was not there for us. It seemed that this bridge that was leading us to a better understanding of God collapsed. And the Palestinian Christians fell in the crack. And we were not able to go back to the former way of worship, to the former way of theology, our former theology that we grew up onto, but we had no way to move forward. We were groping in the dark, seeking to hold on to our faith and not finding a way. It was Father Naim Ateek, who is with us fortunately today, who was the first person to seek a solution and redeem the Bible for Christians and redeem our faith, as I just said. So how do we read the Bible? Naim Ateek, after many, many years, because he was a child in 1948, he sought a key. In theological language, we call it a hermeneutic for reading the Bible. And the key that he found was Jesus Christ himself. So any passages in the Bible, any reading of the Bible that measured up to the mind of Christ, to the teachings of Christ, to the life of Christ, was authentic, was the authentic word of God, because we know God through Jesus Christ. This is for Palestinian Christians. Another way, if we do not use this hermeneutic of Jesus Christ, is love. Both in the Hebrew scriptures and in the Gospels, we were taught that love your neighbor as yourself. In Leviticus 19, verses 17 and 18, it says, love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus raised it to the level of the first commandment. So love your neighbor as yourself. So our reading of the Bible has to measure up to love. So Jesus Christ and love are the keys to reading the Bible. And this really relieved us and helped us. And we were able to hold on to our faith. And until this day, people who know Sabeel, who have worked with Sabeel, who have come to the conferences of Sabeel, believe that God is a God of love, a God of peace, justice, and reconciliation. And that is what we seek and what we hope to do. Now, in 1993, this theological thinking, this theological agonizing, this theological struggle was translated into programs. Naim Ateek, Father Naim, gathered around him a number of Palestinian Christians, lay and clergy, young and old, men and women. And he had written his book. His first book was Justice and Only Justice, A Palestinian Theology of Liberation. And I recommend you to read this book in order to better understand what I'm talking about. And we decided that we will start a center, a movement, in order to put our theology into practice, into programs, and help Palestinian Christians to deal and to face and to struggle and to resist oppression, and it's from a faith perspective. So Sabeel has been going on for 27 years, and we have several programs. I don't have the time to mention the programs, but especially for our friends around the world, it was our international conferences and the books that came out of those conferences that have a wealth of interpretation, of analysis, of ways forward to move towards our aim of achieving liberation for everybody in this land and hopefully around the world. Let me end now. If you have questions, I mean, this is a very wide subject, and I recommend not only the first book that Father Ateek wrote, but then he wrote another book called, this is the book, it's called A Palestinian Christian Cry for Reconciliation. It's a very good book. The third book he wrote was A Palestinian Theology of Liberation. I also recommend reading this book in order to understand all about Palestinian liberation theology. Let me now, sorry?
Thank you very much, Auntie Cedar. And
yes,
we're lucky to have also Assis Naim with us also today.
Yes, he can answer questions at the end of the session.
But before we move to Assis Naim, we will kindly ask Raffoul Rofa from St. Yves to update us on the situation and the challenges of Palestinians in Jerusalem.
Well, good evening, everyone. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a lawyer and the director of the Society of St. Yves Catholic Human Rights Center. And we work basically in East Jerusalem and in Area C of the West Bank. My talk is going to concentrate on our work in East Jerusalem, where we work on issues pertaining to Palestinians, in particular the issue of residency, including the issue of family unification, child registration, and revocation of residency of Palestinians, as well as the issue of demolition, structure demolition, or in other words, house demolition due to lack or improper planning by the Israeli authorities for the Palestinians, as well as the issue of social and economic rights, namely the issue of benefits that are given by Israel to its residents, including the Palestinians in East Jerusalem, and the discrimination there. I'm going to talk briefly about these issues, maybe concentrating more on trying to give you examples of how we provide assistance to our target group, i.e. the Palestinians in East Jerusalem, from cases that we are dealt and are dealing with. One thing you need to know is that Palestinians in East Jerusalem are mainly, according to Israeli law, permanent residents of Israel and not citizens. And therefore, they don't have the same rights as Israeli citizens. So when it comes to the issue of residency, according to the entry into Israel law of 1957 and its regulations, it is easy to revoke this status by the Palestinian from Jerusalem either leaving Jerusalem for 7 years or acquiring permanent residency in any other country or the citizenship of any country. Now, recently there has been a development by a judgment of the Israeli High Court where it made it possible for Palestinians who lost their residency in Jerusalem because they attained permanent residency or citizenship in any other country to be able to ask for residency in Jerusalem back. But in order to do that, they have to come back and actually physically reside in Jerusalem for 2 years prior to them being able to ask for residency back. With the issue of family unification, the law that prevents family unification, i.e. the entry into Israel, the citizenship and entry into Israel law from 2003, temporary ordinance is still in effect. In fact, it was recently extended by the Israeli Knesset for a further year. Now, this law prohibits family unification for Palestinians, but not only to Palestinians from the Palestinian Authority area, but not only. It also prohibits the family unification to the citizens of Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. The law specifies exceptions to this prohibition, namely that it is possible to apply for family unification for Palestinians who are resident of the Palestinian Authority areas if they satisfy the age category, namely that if we are talking about the husband, he must be 35 years or above. If we are talking about the wife, she must be 25 years or above. On top of that, they have to satisfy the residency category or specifications, namely that they have to prove, or the spouse who is from Israel, i.e. Israel meaning here that they are either Israeli citizens or permanent residents of Israel, i.e. Jerusalemites, must be actually physically living in Israel or in Jerusalem in the case of Palestinians from Jerusalem. Also, they have to deal with the issue of security prevention. Now, the law, in order for someone to get family unification, they have to basically be free of any criminal or security record. But not only them and their family. And the law defines family as the parents of the couple concerned, their brothers and sisters, their spouses, as well as any children that they might have either themselves or from other marriages. If any one of these people has a security or criminal record, then the family unification application will be rejected without taking into consideration the fact that the couple themselves are free of such hindrance. Of course, there was a court intervention in this matter as well regarding the security prevention, and the High Court held that it is not possible to revoke or cancel a family unification application on the grounds of security without holding a hearing prior to that revocation to the couple concerned, and giving the spouse who, if there's a security prevention on any of their family, the opportunity to cut all ties with their family. And in a couple of cases that we have dealt with in St. Yves, it was the wives who had to cut their relations with members of their family who had security preventions. And in these cases, the wives agreed to cut their familial ties with these people, and they do so by actually signing on an undertaking to actually cut these ties. And if they are caught in infringing their undertaking, then the family unification application will be rejected. And in one case, one of these spouses, one of these wives, was actually suspected of infringing her undertaking to cut her relation with her brother, and the Ministry of Interior informed her of their intention to revoke her family unification application because she infringed her undertaking. Now, infringing the undertaking means that these people will be, the result will be that they will, besides losing their family unification application and their ability to live with their families, they might also be liable for criminal prosecution. One major topic that we deal with in Jerusalem is also the issue of child registration. You know, Palestinians in East Jerusalem, because they are permanent residents and not citizens, they do not automatically give that legal status to their children. So they have to actually physically make an application to the Israeli Ministry of the Interior to have their newborn child or children registered. Now, if there is any doubt as to the center of life of the family, i.e., if the Ministry of Interior thinks that the parents are living, for example, in Bethlehem or in Ramallah, then the child will not be registered until such time as the parents can prove that they have actually been living in Jerusalem for 2 years. Meaning that the child or the children would be left unregistered without any rights to proper medical treatment, and if they progress in life and become teenagers without getting proper education. And on our website, the St. Yves website, we have examples of such situations where we have a video of one young man who already attained the age of early 20s and who is not registered. And in the video, he says that he knows that his name is Muhammad. However, he can't prove it because he is not registered. He likes to play football, but he was not able to because he was not able to join the team who, in order to play the football matches, had to cross checkpoints. And the team was very reluctant to actually sign him up to the team because they knew that it is not possible for him to cross checkpoints, and if he did checkpoints and crossed the checkpoints and was caught, then it would be difficult for him to get back home, and in fact he might be imprisoned. And he also mentions a situation where he was actually caught on several occasions and taken to the police station because he couldn't prove who he was. And on one occasion, his father followed him to the police station carrying a bag. And the police officer basically asked the father for his identity card and then opened the identity card where all the children are registered. And he says, well, okay, so you are the father of so and so and so, but you are not the father of Muhammad. You know, he's not your son. He said, no, he's my son. And he had to open the suitcase and take out all sorts of documents showing that he tried on several occasions to register Muhammad in the Israeli population register, however, without success. You are welcome to listen to him and his story and other stories on our website. I'm going to talk briefly about the issue of house demolition or structure demolition in Jerusalem, where the law was recently amended. The building and planning law, Israeli building and planning law, was recently amended and made it much more difficult for Palestinians who find themselves in a situation where they built illegally under Israeli law and find themselves unable to defend themselves, because recently there was an amendment to the law where the municipal inspectors who inspect or look for illegal building were given the administrative power to impose on the spot very heavy fines that can go up to 320 or 350,000 shekels for anyone who was ordered to stop building illegally and didn't. Now, you have to keep in mind that the planning situation in East Jerusalem is not straightforward. The Israeli authorities have neglected to plan for Palestinians for many decades, certainly since 1967. And the result has been that many people have started to build on their own and illegally under the Israeli laws. And to the extent that tens of thousands of housing units in East Jerusalem are under threat of being demolished. Now, besides what I mentioned about the amendment to the law, it also basically limits very much the ability of the court that has the jurisdiction to look into this type of case to postpone the demolition. Currently, under the new amendment, the court can only postpone the demolition on a residential building for once only for 6 months, and then the Court of Appeal can postpone it for a further 6 months, showing a reason why it is postponing for a further 6 months. This, in the current planning situation in Jerusalem, leaves the many thousands of Palestinians exposed to them being fined heavily, because the fines were also increased that the court can impose. It also so many Palestinians are finding themselves now being put on trial for the non-compliance with a judicial order, and then fined again, and then eventually, we expect that the number of Palestinians who will be imprisoned due to this amendment is going to be high. But since this is a new amendment, it remains to be seen. I don't know if I have more time. I don't know if Omar can tell me, but if I do, then I'm going to talk to you very briefly about the issue of the benefits or the social and economic rights. Now, since Palestinians in East Jerusalem are permanent residents, so they are not entitled to get the benefits that are given by the state to them, to its residents automatically. At a time when a Israeli citizen, for example, if they have a child, they automatically get the child benefit. However, a Palestinian from Jerusalem, because they are permanent residents, and because there's always doubt as to their center of life, whether they are actually living in Jerusalem or living outside of Jerusalem, then in order to get any benefit from the National Insurance Institute, they have to continuously prove that they're actually living in Jerusalem. And they prove that, sorry?
Sorry, Raffoul, the time is up, but I think we can use the time with questions and answers to go into some of these details.
Okay, fine.
So thank you very much for your input. And now we move to Reverend Naim, our co-founder and the father of Palestinian Liberation Theology.
Can you hear me? Can you hear? I'm okay? Okay. I would like to add my personal greetings to everyone. Thank you all for being here with us. And thanks to the Kumi team that organized this event. we continue to pray for the end of the pandemic. For my part, I would like to talk about the religious and theological significance of Jerusalem for the three Abrahamic faiths, which many people call them the three monotheistic faith, or the three monotheistic religions. I'd like to begin with a short note on the religious and historical background. Over 4,000 years ago, Jerusalem was a small Canaanite village named Yabus that had a village spring and a religious shrine that attracted visitors to offer sacrifices and prayers to the god Shulmanu, a deity whose name means peace, well-being, health. From this humble religious setting, Jerusalem evolved to become a city of great religious significance to three major world religions, namely, in historical order, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. There are three important common religious and theological features that have made Jerusalem special and unique to the three religions. I'd like to mention them briefly, and then I would like to end with three theological comments. So let me begin. First, the first common feature of Jerusalem is what people know as holiness. Jerusalem is considered sacred and holy to the three religions. For Jews, according to the Old Testament, King David conquered Jerusalem by force from its Jebusite native inhabitants and made it his religious and political capital. Later, his son Solomon built a temple in Jerusalem, thus sealing and confirming the holiness of Jerusalem for the Jewish people. Solomon's temple was destroyed by the Babylonians several hundred years later. But years later, the temple was rebuilt, but again destroyed, this time by the Romans in AD 70. For Christians, it is in Jerusalem where Jesus Christ was condemned to death by the religious and political powers of the day. Jesus suffered death on the cross, and as Christians, we believe that God vindicated Jesus by raising him from the dead, and his disciples witnessed his resurrection. In addition, in Jerusalem, the Christian church came into being by the power of the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost. Later in the 4th century, the Church of the Resurrection, or many people call it the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, was built on the place where Jesus died and resurrected, thus sealing and confirming the holiness of Jerusalem for Christians. For Muslims, the holiness of Jerusalem was sealed and confirmed when in the late 7th and early 8th century, both the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque were built. Muslims believe that their prophet Muhammad came on a night journey from Mecca to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem he ascended to heaven and met with Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, and led them in prayer. In Arabic, Jerusalem is known as Bayt al-Maqdis, especially for Muslims, the house of the holy, but we usually in our own language, we say Al-Quds, which means the holy. Therefore, the first common theological feature of Jerusalem for the three religions is its holiness. we say something is holy, this means it is set apart, it is special, it is sacred, it is transcendent. Every one of the three religions believe that God, according to its own religious tradition, has acted historically in a special way in Jerusalem. So the second common theological feature of Jerusalem is this: Jerusalem is a place of pilgrimage and prayer for the three religions. Jerusalem is the city of prayer par excellence. Local and international pilgrims come to Jerusalem to pray, to meditate, to contemplate. If you are a Muslim, you go to the Haram area to pray. If you are a Jew, you go to the Kotel, Western Wall, or Wailing Wall to pray. If you are a Christian, you go to the Church of the Resurrection to pray. The third common theological feature of Jerusalem for the three religions is this: in the city of Jerusalem, the oneness of God is celebrated by every one of the three religions on a daily basis. This is symbolized in the call of prayer by the Muazzin from the minarets, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, which is the same thing is repeated by Jewish believers. Every day they pray to God, the one God. And the Christians similarly, in their Mass, the Divine Liturgy, the Holy Communion, every day, every one of these religions lift daily prayers of praise and adoration to the one holy and sovereign God. So the common theological features of Jerusalem are: it's a holy place, it's a place of pilgrimage and prayer, and it proclaims the greatness and the oneness of God. Let me end with three comments to remember. The first comment about the holiness of Jerusalem. Although we all talk about the holiness of Jerusalem, I believe that holiness is not really expressed in buildings and stones, but in the life of every one of the three communities that lives a holy life in love and charity and service of others. True holiness requires doing justice to the neighbor and living in peace with others. Because God is holy, the community needs to live a holy life. A second comment on prayer. Some adherents of the three religions believe that prayer in Jerusalem has a special or even greater worth and merit before God. But since we believe that God is everywhere, God hears the prayers wherever the person is, in any place under the heavens. For us Christians, when the Samaritan woman from Nablus asked Jesus, where is the best place to worship God, on Mount Gerizim or in Jerusalem, Jesus answered, not in Gerizim and not in Jerusalem. God is spirit, and those who worship must worship God in spirit and in truth. As humans, however, whether Muslims, Jews, or Christians, we like to come on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and offer our prayers to God in this special place. My third and last comment about the oneness of God. Jerusalem is the only place in the world where a beautiful religious mosaic exists. Three religions living in close proximity, each in its own religious tradition, lifting daily praise and adoration to the one God. The tragedy, however, since its occupation of East Jerusalem in 1967, the government of Israel has been Judaizing the city and shattering its mosaic uniqueness to make Jerusalem a city only for Jews. Most Muslims and Christians cannot even come to Jerusalem to pray. Practically, Israel has monopolized Jerusalem in contravention of international law. Israel has been negating the religious, human, and political rights of the Muslims and Christians to Jerusalem. I believe, and this is very important, Jerusalem is equally holy, equally unique, and equally special to every one of the three religions. Israel will never experience peace or security unless Jerusalem is shared in accordance with international law and international legitimacy. It is only then that Jerusalem will return to its God-given vocation as a model city for the three Abrahamic faiths that live together side by side in mutual respect, mutual understanding, mutual acceptance, mutual trust of the other, as they individually and collectively praise and adore the one holy and merciful God, to whom alone belongs sovereignty and majesty now and forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Naim Ateek, for your beautiful insight. At this point, we will open up our discussion to a question and answer portion. So if you have questions, feel free to post those in the chat. If they're directed to a specific person, please include their name in your question. And for those listening on Facebook, you can incorporate your questions into the Facebook chat or the feed there. We have a question that came through for Cedar about how well Sabeel is known throughout the cities and villages in Palestine, and how Sabeel aims to unify Christians in Palestine. This question was also wondering about what particular problems Sabeel focuses on. I know you had mentioned the different programs that Sabeel works on. So again, the question about, is Sabeel well known throughout Palestine, and how does Sabeel aim to unify Christians in Palestine, and what are the particular programs or problems that Sabeel focuses on?
Okay. Yes, I must say that Sabeel is not as well known as we would like it to be. And we must remember that the country is so fragmented. There isn't one Palestinian people anymore. There are the Palestinians inside Israel, the Palestinians in the West Bank, the Palestinians in Jerusalem who have a different status, and the Palestinians abroad. So traveling, moving between one area and the other is very difficult. And very often it needs a permit that is very difficult to get by. But one of the main aims from the beginning, from the establishment of Sabeel, was to connect, to reconnect the Palestinians from all those areas. So almost all our programs, whether for women, for clergy, for youth, even our conferences, we call them moving conferences, because we take them from one place to another. So, and also another difficulty is the small number of staff that we have. So as much as possible, we try to connect and to spread the word of Sabeel from one place to another. But I must say that we are not as well known as we would like to be. What was the rest of the question?
The rest of the question was about the specific programs or the problems that Sabeel focuses on, which you mentioned a little bit, and then how you work on Christian unity in Palestine.
Yeah. One of the main programs of Sabeel is the Clergy Program. And there are 13 major churches in Palestine and Israel, and every one of them used to pull to its side and try to take members from the other church. Now, through the programs of Sabeel, there's much better fellowship. So the clergy get together, they pray together, they discuss the present, the contemporary problems together, and every year we have a clergy retreat that deals with a burning issue, burning theological issue, and the practical issues. So yes, one of our main aims is the unity of the church, at least because our number is very small. Like in the West Bank, we're just over 1%. Inside Israel, it's about 2%. So there's a great need for us to speak in one voice and to serve the people. The church is a pastoral institution to serve the people together. And in the absence of a government for ourselves, the church takes the place of acting like a government, whether in housing projects or other projects in order to help the people. So yes, there's a great attempt to create unity of word and unity of action among the different churches and the clergy.
May I add a word?
Certainly.
I just want to add to what Cedar has said, that Sabeel, I think, is pretty well known within the Christian community of the land, you know, because we have Sabeel in Nazareth and Sabeel in Jerusalem, and we have many programs that relate to the Christian community. And so I think from that end, probably a good number of Christians know about Sabeel, and because of the clergy program, which Cedar has mentioned, also because we work with all the clergy in a very ecumenical way. We also work with Muslims, but with the Muslims, I cannot say that it is well known there, but among the people, for example, the Muslims of Nablus, Sabeel is pretty well known, but not enough. So it's true what Cedar has said, and there is so much we can do more than we have been able to. And obviously now everything has been closed because of the pandemic. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We have a few questions about Jerusalem, particularly. Let me pull one up. Someone asked about, do you think it's possible that liberation for all could be accomplished within a framework of binational state, both Israeli, Jewish, and Palestinian? So they were asking about shared sovereignty and if this vision has any chance of being accepted by both sides.
Who is the question addressed to?
That question was just for anyone who would like to answer.
Maybe we can ask Raffoul to begin with. I'd like to say a few words also about it, and maybe Cedar would like also.
Well, it's a difficult question. The state of Israel was created to be a homeland for the Jewish people. And I do not think that the Israeli government or most of the Israeli people would accept to have one binational state where equality, where everyone is equal under the law. However, on the Palestinian side, despite the fact that the Palestinians have over the past a couple of decades have accepted the idea of a two-state solution. Now with the impasse in the peace process, I think there's a growing number of Palestinians who are willing to go back and consider a one-state solution. Whether it will come about, I doubt it. You know, I don't think that the Israelis or the international community are currently willing for even to hear about such a solution. So the political situation in the Holy Land is difficult, and I foresee it to continue to be difficult and to get even more difficult if the annexation plans go ahead. Thank you.
Go ahead, Assis, and I think you can.
Yeah. I mean, there are many Jewish people and many Jewish intellectuals and Palestinians and maybe most of us feel that the ideal situation, the ideal resolution of the conflict is the one state. But as Raffoul said, Israel, I don't think will ever accept it unless it is imposed on it, you know. I believe ultimately the one state is the best solution. But realistically today, I think the two-state solution, because it is what everybody talks about internationally. That is the international law, the United Nations. People talk about the two-state solution. I believe we need to begin with the two-state solution, and largely because the way I would think, largely because I cannot trust Israel with the one state. We would be, as Palestinians, Christians, and Muslims, we would be living in an apartheid state, you know, totally. Israel is a racist state, as the way we see it, and it's racism partly. I see this, and this is something that we need to reflect on. Partly comes out from the Old Testament. Certain texts of the Old Testament are very racist, and so Israel, I don't trust it with the one state. I would say let's begin with the two states. Let the Palestinians have their freedom, their liberty, their human dignity. Let them show the world that we can be a democratic state. And then eventually in 50 years or even more or less, we can move into the one state on an equal par with Israel. But today it's very dangerous, I believe, to move immediately to a one state solution. That's my feeling, and I'd like to hear what Cedar says.
There was a time when both peoples were mutually exclusive. Like at the beginning, the Palestinians wanted to have one state, Palestine, and now the Jewish people want to have a Jewish state in all what they call the land of Israel. But this theory will never work if we are not mutually inclusive, and if we do not rise to this way of thinking, whether religiously or secularly, there will never be peace in this land. There will never be peace. So liberation for all is the only way forward, and we must continue to strive for that. And I believe, like you, Assis, that we have to begin with two states, and then eventually when there's mutual trust and we find that the best way that we can live together. Pre-1948, we lived together, Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and it worked. So this memory of mine as a child is also my vision for the future, and I believe that it can be achieved.
We have one last question real quick before we might need to move on. This question is particularly for Raffoul. Is there any hope that pressure from the international community to change some of the oppressive laws? Do you see any pressure from the international community, or is the international community silent?
Well, the international community, in particular Europe, is very much interested in hearing what's going on here legally. The EU and the political representative, the diplomatic representative offices of the Europeans, either in Jerusalem or in Ramallah, are always in touch and ask questions. However, I'm not certain about the political will in the individual countries regarding political pressure in order to change the realities here, the legal realities here. I know that the UN knows, the United Nations that is, knows very well what's going on here, knows about all the legal difficulties that and injustices that Palestinians face, and the UN knows about these things in many different ways, including through its Human Rights Council in Geneva. As you know, the UN continuously issues statements and condemnations and reports on the situation of the Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territories. Our experience shows us over the past, I don't know, 50 years that the political will is not there to change things on the ground, unfortunately.
Well, thank you for all of the great questions, and thank you to Cedar, Raffoul, and Reverend Naim and Ateek for the insightful responses. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer every question that was posted today. We can try to send the unanswered questions to our speakers, and if they're able to provide a written response, potentially share those with you. But now we'd like to move on to a song of lament over Jerusalem from the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Jordan and the Holy Land.
You Eve over Jerusalem, lamenting the lack of ability to see the ways that lead to peace. You a political prisoner, today you can't help but hear those words echoing their truth as a new separation war is tearing the Palestinian land and life. We walk the path you have walked, we breathe the air that is yours. We walk the path that you have walked, and we breathe the air that is yours. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, when will you learn the ways of peace? Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, when will you learn the ways of peace? Ways of peace.
It is great for us all to learn about the effects of occupation on Jerusalem, but we at Kumi Now believe that knowledge is just the beginning. The reason that Kumi Now exists is to empower people to act on their knowledge. With this in mind, we'd like you to do something a bit different this week. This week, we'd like you to join us for a Kumi Creativity Week. Instead of organized nonviolent advocacy action for this week, we want to hear from you. Have in mind any creative, out-of-the-box, or unique ideas you have been wanting to see showcased for a Kumi action? Thinking of a simple or effective way to engage in activism? Do you know of a go-to action that you have used for a previous campaign? Now is your time to share those ideas and provide the Kumi project with creativity for future advocacy actions. Grassroots work is most successful when all voices are included. Share your ideas with us during this Kumi Creativity Week by sending an email to kumi@kuminow.com and posting your ideas on social media. You can, of course, also get started by posting your ideas in the chat. When you make suggestions to other people on social media or otherwise, include a link to this page of the Kumi Now website in the hashtags #KumiCreativity, #KumiNow, and #Kumi36. We hope to use your ideas for future Kumi actions. I'd like to ask our guests, do you have any ideas on how to improve engagement with activism or ways that people watching this session can apply what they've learned today about occupation in Jerusalem?
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, I think it's important to convey the message to the people around you and to tell them about what you hear and what you learn from Sabeel and from its programs. I think it's only through teaching people about the reality of life here in Jerusalem and maybe encouraging them to come and visit and see the reality of life for themselves in order for them to try and understand what's going on. You know, because if people only hear about the situation and without actually seeing, it might be difficult for them. But however, if they come and visit and see the reality, then they can become ambassadors and in an attempt to change the reality of life here in Jerusalem. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for being with us today. Next week, we have a very special gathering. It will be an evening of Palestinian literature and music, and will feature a number of Palestinian artists and musicians, including poet Samia Khoury, musical group Al Ruah, and the poetry of Mahmoud Darwish. It's a special session, so anyone who has registered for one of these previous Kumi Now online sessions will also get the information for joining this special session. And you can still encourage others to sign up on the website at kuminow.com/online. We hope to see you all back here next week. And if you like what you've seen today, we'd greatly appreciate if you helped spread the word to friends and family, classes and church groups, and online through social media. Please note that Kumi Now Online continues next month with 4 sessions focusing on topics such as morally responsible investing, the right of return, education funding, and women in conflict. You will get one reminder email from us reminding you to sign up for these sessions, but you can go to kuminow.com/online to register for them at any time. Now we've reached the formal end of the meeting, but if you'd like to hang around, our guests have offered to answer questions in chat. We know people have a lot of other online meetings and responsibilities, so please don't feel obligated to stay around. We'll also be saying goodbye to anyone watching on Facebook and end the recording at this time. Thank you.